Would you agree to an opt-in as opposed to an opt-out?
Senator, I think that certainly makes sense to discuss.
Privacy is under a greater attack than ever before, and the major pushing force is deception.
And we do not sell data to advertisers.
Well,
we don't sell data
to clearly
anyone.
rent it.
We go to great lengths to protect their privacy, and we give them transparency, choice, and control.
If our customer was our product, we could make a ton of money. We've elected not to do that.
All major tech companies are now heavily running on the promise of protecting your data and not selling it to advertisers. And that's while they're luring you into their ecosystems. The Big Five is literally everywhere. If you just end up running a cookie or a tracking script on some random website, or that game you love playing has some hidden Facebook code in it that automatically sends all your phone's data to Facebook even if you don't have an account, your data is being linked, so that wherever you go, the Big Five has their eyes on you, ready to monetize even the little space on your phone's push notifications.
We could make a ton of money if we monetized our customer.
Thanks, Tim. I'll take it from here.
For everybody joining us. Really, it's a pleasure to be with you. It's one of the blessings of technology, despite all of the difficulty that it's introduced to our lives collectively, and of course to my life individually. That if there is one tyranny that we are overcoming, it's the tyranny of distance. So thanks for inviting me into your home or on your trip with you, whether you're in the car, on the bus, whatever. So the topic for the conversation today is supposed to be how we fix a broken internet. And I think we need to begin on that by thinking, what's wrong with the internet? It's faster, it's more connected, it has all these wonderful things. But when I think about the internet structurally, and the challenges that it's facing, they really do go deeper than that. I think in the abstract, when I was younger, and for those of you who remember earlier forms of the internet was really an expression of the aggregate of individual interests and desires of small communities that were knit together by people looking for the like-minded. They were actively courting them. They were trying to invite people, persuade them to look at the things that they're interested in and to share. And I mean that share in a pure sense. It was really given away. There weren't a lot of commercial interests in the earliest expressions of the internet. I wrote in my book from the record that what I saw was the replacement of a creative and cooperative network with something that was commercial and competitive. But in that book, what I describe is not just, people see it as like a biography. It's not really the story of me. It's the story of the time. It's a dual biography of the changing of technology, but more centrally, the changing of the system that borders our lives. And I believe what has been produced in the time since. When we talk about what's wrong with the internet, we have to talk about what's wrong with the world. What has been constructed is a system that is fundamentally unfair. What do I mean by that? Look at the economy. There is an increasing concentration of resources into fewer and fewer hands in every demographic, every chart you look at, every measurement. That leads us into politics, because economy is what provides influence in politics. I think in many of the world's most important countries, whether we're talking about the developing world or developed democracies, as we like to term them, the result is really the same. Voting choices are engineered so that regardless of the outcome, nothing will fundamentally change. Okay, and then that's really the problem, isn't it? What we need, what even children in Sweden recognize today, is fundamental change. And this brings us to culture. It brings us to media, discourse, expression, community. This is the broadest of the subjects that we sort of contend with here, but it's also the easiest to evaluate in short by simply gesturing broadly to it and saying, when you look at what's being discussed, when you look at how it's being discussed, who is discussing it, and the impact that it has, the results that it's producing, the impact that it's having on your lives, are you encouraged by what you see? And you notice that none of the things that I mentioned are technical, despite many, many, many problems in the technical domain, like that little mass surveillance issue that you may have heard about. This is to say that the internet is broken because it reflects a broken society. Unfair systems produce as a byproduct dissatisfaction, and therefore they're typically hard to maintain by historic standards, right? You can maintain over a generation. When you start getting multi-generation, they start to lose their authority, they start to lose their legitimacy, they face insurgent challenges, right? And eventually they're conceded. As our economy, politics, and culture have sought in the modern moment to reduce access to an equal role in our common franchise, right? Resentment and grievance have blossomed to the point that now every discussion has become an instrument of war by other means, right? This competition is everything, and it's everywhere. But who is it that competes, right? For all the breathless talk of radicalism and the increase of extremes, which do exist, they are out there, they are happening. I see very little in the way of this blood sport sort of spreading as a kind of contagion amongst banks. Right? As far as the average worker should be concerned, the largest political parties in any given election in any given country tend to be two different brands of the same Pinkerton. Right? Everywhere that matters, prices go up, while wages fail to keep pace. Institutions, governmental and corporate, have borrowed and spent the wealth of a generation that will never enjoy its fruits. And what are you going to do about it? You see this happening. It's not, advertised, but it is apparent. If you are the average person, you're going to write a hilariously mean tweet about it, about someone that you don't like. You're going to impose it on them. You're going to pick the target of hate and you're going to express that hate. And then you're going to post a picture of yourself in contrast looking extremely cool on Instagram. You're going to do these things from a device that you paid for, but you don't truly own, using apps that answer to just about anyone who is not you. And for what? For the likes. Everything's for the likes. It's for the approval of peers. It's in pursuit of that brief, shining moment that we can leave this decaying hellscape behind and be elevated to the attention of those that we care about, the attention of the crowd. And this is to say that the internet is broken, and institutions are competing against the individual, while the individual competes amongst itself. And this is by design. But competition is everywhere, but only amongst the powerless. We are set against each other in 1,000 ways, from morning until night. We are encouraged to perform in this daily talent show where even when we win, the only reward is the drumming of faraway fingers on a little red heart icon. Meanwhile, there is no competition at all amongst those who rent out the stage upon which these little dramas that represent our lives are played out on. The little dramas of their lives, these little people called we. From ad space to electricity to bandwidth to rent, we pay and we pay and we pay. We pay for the privilege of competing in a contest that society cannot win. I think this unfair system that borders our lives has identified rightly that the dissatisfaction it produces, the dissatisfaction of the masses, can be managed by way of distraction. And by and large, the internet has been instrumentalized to effect this. It can be done by distracting us through necessity. It can be done by distracting us through entertainment, which is actually one of the most effective ways because people appreciate it. It can distract us through division, division of identity, amplified all over the place. I think to maintain a focus on individual privilege in order to overlook close to entirely, I think, issues of generational privilege. I know a lot of people out there are like, oh my God, he said the P word. But it actually does matter. It is real. What do we mean by generational privilege? If you think about what I mentioned before, that earlier internet, everything that I did when I was the youngest of you men has been forgotten. Those records aged off. They were ephemeral. We were generationally privileged to be able to experiment without being worried about it ruining our lives. The old bad tweet that gets so many people canceled today. Exploration was not only encouraged, but the system relied upon it for the furtherance of the borders, boundaries, the settled area of the internet domain. And then over time, bit by bit, as that domain expanded, as more value was created and produced by the network effect and by the people who were settled in this new intellectual space, bars to entry cropped up. And consequences began to crop up, not just for the worst things that we did, but also for some legitimate things. And as that has happened, as that has become systematized, as that has become automated, as we have been profiled, as everything we click on, everything that we search for has been padded out into this automatic dossier, perfect records of private lives for every given person who hasn't done anything wrong. They have simply interacted with a system that cannot be avoided, that is necessary, that underpins everything we do. The consequences, the bars became too high. The results of curiosity, of expression, of exploration became too dire to risk. And I think this has turned us inwards, and it has made us sort of more of a sloganeering population, where we see things that other people said, and then we affiliate ourselves with the tribe, and then we repeat it. And then if we make a mistake, if we say something we really don't like, we have to double down, we have to defend it, even if we don't agree with it, even if we evolve behind it. Because to admit mistake is to admit error. To admit error is to basically announce wrongdoing. And this wrongdoing can never be, forgiven en masse. And it certainly cannot be forgotten. And I think, if you were the age now that I was then, when I was growing up on the internet, you are at disadvantage on practically every axis, every point with this system. Anonymity is harder. If you want to look something up and don't want it to be traced back to you, it's difficult to kind of shelter your routes of inquiry. Pseudonymity is discouraged. Private identity in general is culturally looked down upon now, seen as unseemly, or I think even in many contexts, harmful. And we need to think about where that leads, because the other P word that I haven't mentioned yet is privacy. What is the purpose of privacy, and why is its loss on the internet so damaging? Because privacy is what protects that right of inquiry, that leads to progress. When we talk about privacy, the privacy right, there's always somebody out there, verbally retweeting that if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear, which originates from the actual literal Nazis known as propagandist skills. But the reality of privacy is that privacy was never about something to hide. Privacy was about something to protect. Privacy is the right to the self. It allows you to be different and distinct from the majority. Rights in general don't exist to advantage or protect the majority. The majority doesn't need them. The majority decides the laws. The majority is what the system protects, generally. Rights are the only prongs of the system that protects the minority against the majority. Why do we do that? Is it just because we're nice? Is it just because we've sort of evolved so far that we can become benevolent? No, I think in a coldly practical way, it's because the people who write the rules in many countries had to go through a revolution in order to do that. They had to exist for at least a moment as a not open their eyes to the fact that it is the differences amongst us that provide those seeds of progress. If you stand with the majority, there's tremendous good you can do for society. Not to say, having a majority opinion to persons, the average of the average, is in any way undesirable. But when you have a difference, when you think differently, when you see differently, when you speak differently, when you feel differently, when you just want to try something, when you want to see how something works out, if that is dangerous to you, if that is risky, if that is harmful to you, you are disincentivized to try it. And then society has lost something meaning. Because that is our only way to break from the orthodoxies of history, the way that things have just been done, are done today, and have always been done, and to try something new. Right? Most of the things that people do differently are not valuable or not useful or not good, or they could actually actively be harmful or bad. But particularly when they're done on an individual level, particularly when they're done on a small level, they are the engine of all human progress. They are what drove us out of the swamp of history to what we have today in the spaces that it's better and worse. But when we talk about that language of privacy, the privacy right, insofar as it's constructed by reading into the penumbras of the Constitution in the United States and elsewhere, sometimes, fortunately, more explicitly around the world, we have to recognize that all things that belong to an individual derive from privacy. It's the reason we call it private property. It means you have a stake on something, even if only your own mind, your own self, your own soul, distinct from the claims of society. Now, when we entangle that with the internet, well, we start to entangle that with the systemization, the quantization of everything we do. When you turn your car on, like most people, even in this quite technical audience, who buy a new car are not cognizant of the fact that the phone or the car is a phone. It has a cellular radio built into it that costs the manufacturer only $40 a unit. That will tell them, when your car needs to come in for service. It'll tell them how fast it's been going. It'll tell them where it's at. It'll allow them to turn it off and take it back in the case that you don't pay your lease or whatever. When this happens at an individual level, an individual event, an individual appliance, it can be concerning, but it's not, existentially threatening. When it's everything everywhere, when it is all electricity, when it is all devices, when we go out on the street, when we drive an old car that was manufactured in like 1955, it has like big old crazy Buick tails on it, you would think that, then you wouldn't be tracked. But now we have automated license plate readers, everything else. We have facial recognition that's happening everywhere. We have biometrics that are spreading everywhere. And more and more and more, we have demands for proven identity that are asserted at every interaction with, again, that ring of institutions. And again, regardless of their industry, regardless of whether they are corporate or governmental, if you look over the fullness of time of the last several decades, really, you can start to get into hundreds of years, you'll see that the institutions feel a greater sense of fraternity, a greater sense of kinship, greater ties of identity to other institutions than they do to you, and to the public at large, and to society writ broad. And this, I think, is the central problem that we are facing. We have been, as individuals, we have been, as a society, atomized, fragmented, spread thin, and really harried by 1,000 demands and needs and requests for attention, for